At an event at the White House yesterday designed to honor a 16-year-old lifeguard and the 10-year-old boy he rescued earlier this summer, Donald Trump again let his misogyny show when he didn't pass up an opportunity to viciously attack a female journalist whose question he did not like. CNN's Kristen Holmes asked Donald Trump at the event about comments from Senator Jon Ossoff. Ossoff said that Trump is more interested in traveling around with his aide, Natalie Harp, who has been referred to as Trump's human printer, than he seems interested in doing his job as the president of the United States. Harp was notably among the handful of aides chosen to accompany Donald Trump as he stowed away in a catering cart and then secretly fled Air Force One in Turkey for a third aircraft to fly to the UK. Holmes clearly struck a nerve with her question because when she asked another question about Trump's relationship with Kim Jong-un, Donald Trump resorted to, again, vicious personal attacks against her and even tried to drag the 10-year-old boy sitting next to him into the attacks. Watch.
Did he ask you to scale back on those?
Quiet. You're very disrespectful in front of this young man. Okay? Don't you find her disrespectful? He understands. Quiet. Who are you with?
I'm with CNN.
Fake news.
I just wanted to follow up on the South Korea question.
You're a loud, boisterous person. You're fake news.
I was trying to find out if you had been talking to Kim Jong-un, if he had asked you to scale back on those military exercises.
After the event, the White House escalated those personal attacks against the journalist, Holmes, in a social media post reacting to her question regarding Natalie Harp. The White House invoked Holmes' children and accused her of asking a, quote, disgusting and inhumane question. As a reminder from New York Times journalist Maggie Haberman, this is who the White House is so clearly triggered over facing questions about.
We got these letters that she had been leaving in his private spaces, and they were very raw. They were very emotional. In one, she said, "You are all that matters to me." But these notes that she was leaving alarmed the Secret Service, who were concerned about it, who raised issues about it at the time. Trump has been open with people that, she's the person who loves him on staff as much as his, wife and children.
I want to bring into our coverage my friend and colleague Eugene Daniels. He's an anchor on The Weekend. He's co-host of the Clock It podcast and our senior Washington correspondent. He's also a former president of the White House Correspondents Association. Claire is still with us. Let me show you Jon Ossoff. Let me just sort of rewind the tape a little bit more. And let's all watch our colleague Jen Psaki asking Senator Ossoff about this line of attack, which I played on the show yesterday. This seems to be what has triggered Donald Trump into smearing journalists, smearing Ossoff, and the whole White House going into absolute freakout mode. Let me show you his response to our colleague Jen Psaki.
Why'd you decide to invoke Natalie Harp specifically in that speech?
Well, Jen, thank you for having me. And here's the point. We're in wartime. The commander-in-chief has mired us in this geopolitical disaster. People have lost their lives. Our naval logistics are frayed. The global energy system is in crisis. And he retreats into this bubble of West Wing aides who are his security blanket to make him feel good about himself, to reassure him that he's doing a great job, to help him while he designs his new ballroom and he adorns the Oval Office in gold and picks the interior decorations on this new luxury flying palace he received from a foreign prince. When every single minute of every single day, what the President of the United States should be doing is bearing his most solemn burden of care for the sailors and Marines and aviators and all service members deployed on his orders on the basis of his lies to this disaster in the Middle East.
Eugene, second time in the hour, I'll harken back to my time in government. It is everyone's prerogative to understand how the country's only commander in chief, right? Like, he's elected president, but he also carries out the responsibilities of the only commander in chief, where he gets his information, how reliable the information is at a time when his decisions and his posts can be the difference between life and death at a time of active war. It matters all the time, but especially when the country is deployed in a hot war with Iran. Your thoughts on how insane Donald Trump's statements are to the CNN journalists and the posts from the press office? And I know they sort of play these wacky figures online, but these are really vicious threats against the journalists. What do you see?
It's disgusting, Nicole, right? It's disgusting. It is something we have seen over and over again, right? It's not surprising, but I continue to allow myself, even in the Trump era, to be shocked. And what I mean by that is, this is not normal. And you know this better than anyone. This is not a world in which we can pretend like the president going after, especially the women reporters, the way that he does is normal. And then his team tweeting out attacks about her children. And to watch people, the Republicans, go after Jon Ossoff and say, oh, no, how dare he talk about Natalie, when the president every single day is attacking women in sexist and misogynistic ways. And as a reporter, what I do know is there is no surefire way more than to say the way that they've reacted. That is the one way to make sure that reporters continue on this line of questioning about what this relationship is and, you know, how close they are. And I trust what Maggie said and what they reported in their book. But there's also, she's always around and she's always printing off things. And when people come to him and tell him certain things about polling, he will say, Natalie, print off the real polls. And so that relationship, the kind of information, as you were saying, that the president is getting actually does matter all the time. And it matters more now than ever. And I think watching this president attack Kristen, who just is doing her job and has always just done her job, and all the other women that he's done this with. It happened when I was president of the WHCA. It happened all the time. And we can't let it become normalized because it's just disgusting and not okay.
You know, Claire, I was thinking about Cassidy Hutchinson, who's another young woman who worked for Donald Trump, who didn't receive any of the supportive tweets from Mark Thiessen or any of the other right-wing men who seemed very triggered on behalf of Donald Trump. And this one aide, after Senator Ossoff made his point about, and it's a fact, it's not even in dispute that this is who he snuck into the catering truck with, one of the aides that was there. It's also the Diet Coke person, Walt Nauta, and the internet social media person, Dan Scavino.
Yeah, if I were a journalist that had access to the president, I think the next question has to be, if you were taking a different plane because of a verified threat to you, then who you choose to take with you is a very valid question. So my question would be, why would you take this young woman instead of your Secretary of State? I mean, he left Marco Rubio on the plane that they were afraid was going to get attacked. And because that was the only rationale for him sneaking in the catering truck and going in the other jet. So it really is an important question that in the and I think that Ossoff is correct. He has to surround himself with people who are adoring, who are constantly telling him that, yes, he's doing great, there's no problem. And I think this woman is probably at the top of that list, along with Nauta and the other sycophants that are in the tight circle. But for the country, what does it say that he'd rather have her be safe than his own Secretary of State? That's a really good question. And I'm sure now Eugene's right. I mean, he has now succeeded in making her a story that will go on and on and on. And it's never going to make him look good.
Well, and the Secretary of State and the Treasury Secretary, I think I might be wrong, but I believe 4th and 5th I mean, they have official constitutionally mandated roles in the success. I mean, they would step into the presidency. So, you know, example number 7,423 that Congress has broken. They're not even asking questions about a threat that whether or not it was credible. And if it was credible, which would seem to be the only explanation for putting Trump on the catering truck and lying about where he was, why did the Secretary of State and the Treasury Secretary, who are, I think, fourth and fifth or the other way around in the line of succession,